In a recent update to the game, the merit system was somewhat overhauled, and this change was met with a lot of anger, frustration, but in my opinion at least, a lot of just misconceptions and confusion. So, merit, what it was previously known as, has been split into two things. You have individual merit and historical merit. So the number listed under historical merit is functionally the exact same as what merit was previously. So anyone worried about their merit being, I saw words like stolen or taken away from them, all you have to do is look at this historical merit number, and this will be the exact same number as what your merit would have been previously. There is no merit that's been taken away from this at all. It's just your all-time amount of merit accumulated with no decay, and it will just continue increasing according to how much merit you get from here on out. What was changed, however, was individual merit, and this was effectively changed to make way for new nobility ranks. So the previous highest of Meister is the exact same. I should make that clear. There is nothing changed into how this is obtained. It's still at 1.5 billion power and 50 million merit. But to get into the Prince Nobility ranks, you'll need the exact same power of 1.5 billion, which is a very relevant point because a lot of accounts have ballooned up to Meister for the nobility stats and then dropped all their troop power since you didn't need to maintain it. That is no longer possible because the way the Prince ranks are allocated is it refreshes in this list here every single Monday, and effectively all these places on this leaderboard can change week to week. And this will, through that, I imagine, incentivize fighting or any form of merit gain, since you will effectively be indirectly improving your PvP stats through obtaining merit at this point, when you are obviously in this very small bracket of players at the top of the game. And that is something to note, that this will not affect anything for 99.9% of the player base. If you went into this update with less than 1 billion merit, it's basically entirely irrelevant to you, and you don't really need to give it any thought whatsoever. But the way this system will work is your merit number every Monday will be reduced. So initially, this was merit past 50 million. They did a hotfix last week, and it was now excess merit above 100 million will be taxed by 5% and removed every single Monday. So it's not this whole merit number here, it's this merit number here minus 100 million, and then 5% of that is taken and then reduced from your total merit number. And this will happen to everyone in the whole game who has merit in excess of 100 million. And then the Prince rank leaderboard will be updated accordingly, and so will these different tiers of the Prince Nobility ranks. So you can see the stats to all these ranks here, and you can see the stats are very, very significant. So I imagine, whilst it's still in its infancy right now, we will begin to see a lot of emphasis put on these ranks long term, because the stats you get from even being, let's say, 30th compared to 72nd is very significant, with that additional 35% further help. And it's little things like this at the top which really can give people an edge. But in effect, that is pretty much the entire new merit system right there. It isn't as complicated as some people made it out to be when it first came out, and it isn't something most players need to worry about whatsoever, because merit, in my mind, has always had two purposes. One is nobility ranks, so everything before these Prince ranks is totally unchanged. And the other purpose of it was effectively flexing, and again, just look at your historical merit number, and you can compare this against other players, and that is also unchanged. There has been leaderboards added for both of these also, which you can find under global rankings here. I think the individual merit rankings are as you would expect, but historical merit rankings are in need of a bit of a fix. I imagine at least that will be resolved at some point soon. You see, like Barbarossa shows his historical merit number here, but Terax, or what was the blue account, is showing his individual merit number. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there, but that will be fixed at some point, I'm sure. But you can really see the relevance of what I was saying previously about having to maintain that 1.5 billion power, because a lot of the people in these high ranks are zero castle merit hunters. So the blue account here, nowhere near 1.5 billion. So it can't have those Prince Nobility ranks. The same with, say, Kakado here. What was the Vane account? Again, it's 600 mil off that 1.5 billion. So a decision is potentially needing to be made there where do you balloon up that 600 million for the additional stats, or do you stay small so you can keep going hunting to all these smaller kingdoms? And I would imagine the intention of this change would be to promote more fighting, since indirectly fighting for these top accounts will now be getting converted into stats. Whether that will actually happen in practice, I'm not entirely sure, but I think that was the intention. I would be very surprised personally, at least if this wasn't just exploited long term through means beyond just fighting in kingdom or invading. I won't spell out exactly what I am thinking of there, but if you're now gaining stats from merits, it doesn't take too many steps of thought to end up with what I'm thinking of. But we'll see how it ends up long term. For me personally, if I was implementing this system myself, with the way they've done the merit decay element, I think it would have been healthier if they just reset everyone to 100 million merit as a default value, if they already had it, of course, and then began the decay after that, because with how it is currently, the already established old accounts with huge amounts of merit numbers already, the time it's going to take for them to decay to the point of, for example, a new account that's made today to catch up and potentially overtake them is just so implausible. And it's a bit counterintuitive to the system, because I think the system is somewhat healthy in what it's trying to go for, where it's basically saying because of the decay, you can't just sit on things you did 3 years ago. You have to keep maintaining this to stay in these top ranks since it updates weekly. But it's such a high base number as it is, and it's obviously not going to be 5% being taken off this historical merit number every single week. It will be gradually a lower and lower amount. So that's something I would have done slightly different, but I'm obviously not designing the game. This is the system we were given, and hopefully I've explained all the details of it. The main takeaway of this is, if you have thought yourself or you've seen anyone say they're stealing our merit, they're taking away things we've worked for, it's not the case. Merit is just slightly different now with the historical component of it and the individual component of it. If you want to see how much you've had all time, just look to your historical merit number, and just don't overly worry about what's going on with this individual merit number unless you're exceeding 1 billion merit and at 1.5 billion power, where it will then be realistic for you to actually get these ranks and potentially find your way into some extra stats that you wouldn't have had previously.